All right, I think we're going. All right. Good morning, Juho. Thank you very much for being here with us today. Um, and I want to start off by saying thank you so very much for this incredibly helpful and useful app that you've been working on, and for accommodating especially some of the repertoire that Solo of the Month, the Facebook group, has been working on. So far, we've done one of the Bach sonatas, the Boulanger, the Chaminade is what we're working on this month, the Doppler Berceuse, the Fauré pieces, the Wilbert Madrigal, and the Reinecke Ballades. So I have been enjoying this app quite a lot, and I think the Soul of the Month group has also. So first off, thank you very much. And before we talk about the app too much, can you just maybe talk about yourself for a moment?
Oh yeah, so hello to everybody, also from my side. My name is Juho Pohjonen. I'm professionally a concert pianist, but I'm also the developer of the MyPianist app. And I'm normally based in Helsinki, Finland. Right now I'm calling in from the Marlborough Festival from Vermont, so I'm playing here some chamber music. And I mean, I have to say it's really nice to hear that the app is being used because I mean, as a musician, it like gives me a lot of joy to learn about the usage of the app and that it's been helpful for other musicians.
What was it that encouraged you to create this app?
I started on violin as a musician before studying piano. So when I grew up, like the best moments of music making on violin were always the ones when I got to play with somebody. And also they were quite rare moments. So at some point, because I always had some interest in computers and coding, so at some point I started thinking that maybe there's a way to connect like both my interest in music and to coding. So I had this idea of maybe it would be possible to create kind of an AI pianist that would play with you. And yeah, it took a lot of time to figure it out how to do it because basically I had no training like formally about like how like audio processing works. But like after years of kind of perseverance, I managed to make it happen.
So how long have you been working on this app and how long has it been available to the public?
I think I started working on the app about 10 years ago, and it took probably 5 years before I had any kind of prototype ready. And then like in order to make like a commercial app that has like all the kind of most of the bugs ironed out took maybe further 2 years. So it's been now on the market for about 3 years.
About 3 years, yes. And actually, Sean, who's joined this meeting with us, is also an IT person and flutist. So it's great to have people who are living in both the world of classical music and modern technology to help bring such a, hundreds years long tradition into a more modern world and society where we can use these tools at our fingertips that are being created now. So that's amazing. And wow, what a labor of love. In these 10 years, what has been the biggest challenge in developing this app?
Mm, Probably the biggest challenge was personally just to keep my interest up for the first 7 years before it was released. So of course there were some moments when I thought that it's not going anywhere, and like is it like worth actually investing so much of my time for an app that potentially is never going to be released. But like technically speaking, probably the hardest thing was to get the piano sound right, because as a pianist I'm really picky about how the piano should sound like, and like none of the piano synthesizers which I tried out actually sounded good, so I had to create my own synthesizer for this.
Wow, so this is a unique piano tone that we're hearing when we use
Yes.
these apps.
Oh yeah. So how I actually did it, that I went to Germany to a concert hall in Neumarkt, which has been used on quite a good, like a lot of classical recordings, like Andras Schiff has been recording there. So I recorded that piano, sampled all the keys with 5 different dynamics, especially in the softer range, because that's much more important in chamber music. And then, yeah, I essentially built a model around that piano.
That is so very impressive.
Wow.
Now, many of us are, and Sean, did you have some questions before I keep talking?
I'll hold them for later. Keep
Sure.
going.
So I think it would be great if you could just give us a little rundown of the app itself, and give us, I guess, a brief tutorial. Many of us in the group are using it. I know that I'm not using it to its potential because I am one who's been technology avoidant for too much of my life, and so these are some newer things for me. And Sean is one of the main reasons why I'm exploring more and more technology. So I'm glad he's in this meeting today. I think it's one of his great hobbies. But I would love just to hear you talk about the app a bit.
Oh yeah, so, well, I mean, I guess you already know that it's essentially a virtual pianist that plays with you, listens to your playing, and then tries to follow your playing as well. So basically you can play sonatas, concertos, other repertoire with an AI that tries to simulate a real pianist. And yeah, well, if I just give a little tour about the user interface. Again, if you have used the app already, it's probably pretty basic, but probably still worth doing. So I have the screen shared on the Zoom, and basically you have 3 main views in the app, which are the library view, score view, and settings view. And on a phone, these are shown as different tabs. And on a tablet, you actually have like sidebars for library and settings. And the library basically gives you all the choices of the pieces. It shows which pieces you have downloaded to your device, which are available offline also then. And it might also show suggestions about which pieces you could play next based on the pieces you have been playing before. And it also shows trending pieces and then which pieces have been added recently. So if I choose, say, like Mozart Flute Concerto, D major, you also get options to print the music over here. And also in this view, you will see any recordings you may have made with the app. And just by tapping on the title, you can get to the piece. And this automatically switches to the score view. And basically the score view is the sheet music with some interactive elements which are highlighted in red. So the play button, of course. And then if you have things like repeats or cuts, like in this piece, which are indicated by these vide signs, you can enable the cuts by tapping them. And also you can change the metronome mark by swiping vertically.
Right, so you can remove or you can have the piano skip those 16 measures of what's normally orchestra playing.
Yes, I mean, that's out of like just convenience for players, because if you're playing like an audition, then you don't want to hear all the overture. And you can switch pages by swiping, of course. And also there's a seek bar at the bottom of the screen right here, and you can quickly scroll within the music by touching that. And sometimes in some pieces you have cadenzas. And if you tap on the cadenza, then you can actually teach the app how you play the cadenza, because otherwise it would just expect to hear a trill at the end, which may not be very reliable, especially if you have some trills in the cadenza also. So you can actually show the app how you want to finish the cadenza.
Just by tapping on the cadenza word?
Yes, and then you have to press the begin and then play it. Just the ending of the cadenza. You don't have to play the whole thing.
Okay, so what part to listen for there?
Yes.
Wow.
It's not like 100% reliable, but it's better than nothing.
Sure. And just since we're still in the very beginning of this, I do want to point because he's using his phone through the Skype, and I don't have it set up to mirror. But for those of you who are using something bigger than a phone, and yeah, you could play off of this, you can play off of your phone and still see the music if you are in a pinch like that. But I've got on my tablet, and it very quickly transitions from the landscape view to the normal view, and it's easy to just go with whatever your stand is. I know for me, I've been using it in the horizontal mode a lot just because the music is slightly larger that way, and I can move the music further from my face. So I did want to point out how it does fit to whatever device you are using, and it changes with the way that you've got the device set up. So that's a really nice feature.
Oh yeah, and also on iPad you can use multitasking, so you can actually open 2 apps at the same time. So you might have like PDF file of the score open at the same time as you are using MyPianist.
Excellent. All right.
Well, basically that's the score view. There are 2 other things which I want to mention. If you tap on any bar, you can bring out the play button and the annotation tools. And there's also a shortcut for annotations, which is if you pinch and zoom, and then you can just go directly to the annotation mode.
Okay. And what kind of options are there in the annotation mode?
You can use a pencil, basically, and a highlighter. You can add some text. It's really simple, especially because I had to build it in a way that you can the annotations would stay the same no matter which orientation you turn the page.
Right. I remember us talking about annotation several months ago, and I was going to mention that too. So when I annotate in the horizontal mode, the annotations do stay with the note heads when I transition the tablet up and down.
Mostly.
Right.
Sometimes
Mostly,
there
yeah.
are bugs, like, and you can also share the annotations. And something that's maybe useful is that it automatically actually groups the annotations by the date you have made them. So you can maybe, like, if you are like a teacher, you can actually share the annotations you have made on a specific day to your students, for instance.
And that is found through the 3 horizontal lines. That's actually
Yes.
something I had never touched before on this. So
Right.
that's really great. And with that, you can lock the annotations.
You can lock them or turn them,
can,
like make them invisible or visible.
Great. When you print, do the annotations print with the?
I don't think so.
You don't think so? Okay.
No. And if you have used pinch to zoom to switch the annotation mode, you can actually go out by doing the reverse. So it's pretty convenient.
I hadn't even noticed the annotation menu because I just grabbed my pencil for my tablet.
Right. Oh yeah.
It goes right into that mode.
Yeah, it works like that too. Yeah.
And what Sean is saying, for those of you who will be watching later, if I just take my pencil to it, it automatically will let me notate on it. It doesn't even open the annotation mode menu. I can just immediately start drawing. So that saves a little time if you do have a stylus of some kind that you use with your tablet.
Yeah, still, if you have to erase something, you have to switch to the annotation mode.
Or a quick sharp or something if you're right.
Yeah.
But now I need to erase that.
And then finally, there's the settings view. And the most important thing is probably the 3 different accompaniment modes in the settings view. And basically, I've tried to design this process of working with the app as like similar to the process actually when you play with a real pianist. So first you probably want to study the piano part a little bit so you know what to expect. And then you practice a little bit, and then finally you perform it. So the first accompaniment mode, the preview mode, is really for studying the piano part. So when you enable that mode, the app doesn't listen to your playing at all. It doesn't react to you. So you just can preview how the piano part sounds like. You can optionally also add the solo part to the preview. And it's synthesized with like a very basic tone, but it's better than nothing, I think.
Right.
And also you can switch on metronome in the preview, which can be useful also. And the practice mode is, I think that's the only mode that's available only for subscribers. And basically you get to have different practice tools, which may be useful. Like you can do, of course, like basic tools like metronome, you can make practice loops. Sometimes you want to make practice loop even like get faster by each repetition, you can do that. And also it can highlight your intonation. So if a note is too sharp or too flat, you can actually see it in the sheet music.
Hmm.
Can you just briefly describe what the difference is between these modes? So people...
Yes, so within the practice mode, there are also different practice styles. So the first one, solo practice, it basically like removes the piano part. So you can just play solo and it still turns pages for you. It listens to your playing. And if you use metronome, it still keeps ticking. And you can make practice loops. I mean, you can use basically all the tools available, but without having to play with a piano.
You said it listens to you and turns pages?
Well, yeah. I mean,
So this could be useful if you were playing a multi-page work with a live pianist. You could use this mode and then you wouldn't have to turn pages potentially. It would
potentially, but I would not rely on them for this myself. I mean, I don't rely on human page turners even. Just, yeah, I want to use a foot pedal or something to turn pages, yeah, to be in full control. The other practice mode is sight reading mode, which is quite useful if you are starting to play a piece with a pianist and if you feel a bit insecure about your tempos. So basically what it does is that the app is trying to lead your tempo. So if you take liberties somewhere, it tries actually to push back to the original tempo.
Does it hold strict to the metronome, or does it start to follow you but try to slow you back down if
it
you're
tries
rushing?
to follow you. It actually gives you a little bit more liberties, because when you are like sight reading, sometimes you have to take more time somewhere.
And we flute players are notorious for rushing, when especially the harder part. The harder the run, the faster we want to get through it. So we have we're very notorious for rushing. So that would
Right.
allow a little bit of rushing, but then encourage us to slow back down.
Yes,
Okay.
yes, yeah. And intonation practice actually gives you the most liberties regarding rhythm, because sometimes you just want to hold one note very long and then keep exploring the intonation. So basically it's free rhythm. And then the rhythm practice is actually the opposite from intonation practice. So it actually tries to keep a very steady rhythm, and also it does reduce the built-in rubato a little bit. So if there's some built-in timing in the kind of the score, it tries to reduce that to half. So basically when I have, for instance, played the piano part for the app at some point, I'm of course trying to use the natural kind of rubato and timing. And in the rhythm practice mode, this is being reduced by some amount. And also it tries to keep as steady as possible the tempo. And finally, the rehearsal practice mode is like when you rehearse with somebody, like trying to prepare for a performance. So basically it doesn't do any like adjustments to the AI. So it's the best AI there is in the app, but you can still use all the practice tools. And also in the rehearsal mode, you can switch on the learn my phrasing feature, which basically enables the app to remember your timing in the previous run throughs. So this means that the app can slowly kind of anticipate your timing in advance, because otherwise it would have just to react to whatever you are doing.
So if there's a section where we know as the performer that we have challenged rhythm or tendency to rush or something, would practicing that section then in the preview be the best way of keeping the metronome exactly steady? So that way we don't rush at all? Or is there a way in these practice modes to also not speed up or slow down with us to make us maintain
I would use the rhythm practice mode.
the rhythm practice mode?
Yeah, because that reduces the built-in rubato also. So the metronome would be even more steady.
Great.
Yeah.
And then these sub-selectable areas, can you go through the list of what the practice assistant, for example, does? And
Yeah, so the practice assistant actually displays a kind of a piano roll view of the music. So that's maybe the most complicated practice mode, or practice tool, but yeah, so it overlays what you have been playing on top of the kind of the piano roll. So you can see all of the notes which you have played and how the app actually heard them, and also like your intonation in each note and during each note. So if you have a long note and you're kind of not very even with your intonation, you can actually see how it like develops over time.
and let's see, is that available on the Android version as well?
It should be, yes.
Maybe I'm in dark mode. So mine currently just has kind of dark gray there. I wonder if it's because I'm in dark mode that I'm not seeing the MIDI shapes.
It depends. If you can just click on a bar with some music, you should actually switch to that. So probably you are now in the overture, which has no notes at all.
Right. So I think I still don't see much except a dark gray bar, but it could be because my tablet itself is set to be in a dark mode. So I'm curious if I switch out of that, if I'll see that bottom thing more. But I can talk to you directly about that too because I'm
Oh yeah,
enjoying
sure.
hearing this.
And also it's worth mentioning that the Android version is still a beta version. So there might be, and I know that there are bugs, unfortunately. The other,
Still, it's really impressive to get an app like this out on the Android platform. So yeah, it makes it available to a lot more people.
yeah, but it wasn't easy at all.
I'm sure.
Frustrating.
Thank you. I know I've been one of your like thorns in the side about the Android stuff too.
Yes.
And I do want to tell people who might be listening later, when I switched out of dark mode, I can see exactly what he's showing now. So in
Oh,
dark mode, where I usually leave my tablet in dark mode, I have, kind of sensitive eyes. But when I was in the normal view mode, I can see exactly, it looks exactly like that. So
okay, that's actually very helpful for me to know. So I need to look at that issue later. The highlight intonation mode is kind of practice assistant, but easier because it actually highlights the intonation directly in the sheet music. So it colors the note heads according to how you play. So blue is flat and orange is sharp.
I use that a lot in my practice.
And I think it works pretty well. Of course, intonation is a very complicated subject. And especially with string players, you have to consider like how the actual instrument resonates with the intonation. But the way it works on the app is that it compares the intonation to the piano intonation. And that's actually a little bit stretched, like as it's not exactly equal tempered. So the higher you go, the higher actually the intonation is. But it's,
which is comfortable for flute players. That's
yes. And if you play with the piano, you have to actually follow the intonation of the piano and not maybe the natural intonation of your instrument, because otherwise you don't sound good together with piano.
fantastic. I haven't used that mode before, but that's really nice to see. Because you can also play it in real time and then go back and look and see where those orange dots might be and spend a little time there in the review. So those intonation things that I just recorded a moment ago stick on the screen afterwards, so you can do a run and enjoy it, and then go back and worry about the intonation later too. If you're
What makes the intonation highlighting useful for me is it persists the coloring on the page. So you see it as you're approaching that section on your next run through the passage. And then you can see in real time whether you adjusted enough to, get it to no longer color code that note. So it's a nice bit of visual feedback as you're playing through.
There's one word of warning. Like, one of my users actually said that she started seeing colors even when they are not using the intonation mode. Like, seeing orange and blue all the time when she plays.
I hope it won't get to that point.
Right. And you can make the intonation like you can control how like demanding the app is, because sometimes like with some pieces the intonation doesn't matter that much, and you might want to make the app less demanding with the intonation. So there's a setting to control that. Practice loops you can make easily. It's not maybe the most intuitive way to define them, but you just basically tap on the start point of the loop and then the end point. And then the play button becomes like a loop button, which you can then tap. And if you want to make the loops get faster by each repetition, you can do that too by selecting and accelerating practice loops.
I've experimented with that, and I find the acceleration rate a little too aggressive.
So maybe what you have to do is, before you enable that, you should go, because there's a shortcut like a swipe gesture, which controls your general practice tempo.
Yeah, I was going to point that out and
Yes.
have you circle back to that.
Yeah. So if you swipe up, it actually makes the practice tempo slower. It doesn't change any of the metronome marks, which is good, I think. So with the accelerating practice loops, you should start with the slower tempo, of course. But yeah, probably, yeah, it depends on how long your loop is. If your loop is like 2 minutes long, then you don't want to have too little acceleration between the loops. Yeah. When designing this, I was thinking about how much control I should give users to control the rate of the acceleration, but it would get really complicated easily.
Yeah, the interface might get overwhelming.
Yeah. And well, metronome is basically a metronome. The good thing is that it follows your timing. So it's not really like a steady metronome that would make your playing really mechanical, but it's more like that you get a sense of the pulse of the music. And actually right now there is no way to make a totally mechanical metronome in the app, which is the way I prefer it. But if you need a metronome, there are lots of apps for that anyway.
And it would be most steady in the rhythm mode, is that correct?
Yes, yes. And then finally, there's the record my practice setting, which means that you get like the app automatically records how you play, and these recordings are actually temporary, so you don't have to worry about erasing them afterwards. You have the option to save them for later if you want to. And also, while you listen to the recordings, it actually now shows where you are in the score, and you can quickly seek within recordings by tapping the score while the recording is playing back. Then if we go to the final accompaniment mode, which is the perform mode, there's probably the most important setting of all of the settings, which is the accompaniment sensitivity. And it's also kind of the hardest to describe, because I guess for many users, the intuition is that they want to have the most sensitive accompanist possible. I mean, I want to have, but the sensitivity actually doesn't mean sensitive in that way. So what it does is that it controls how fast or how quickly the accompanist adapts to your playing. So if you're very confident with your timing and you have very good technique and you can make the app understand your playing really well, you can switch to high sensitivity, and then the app would follow you much more closely. But if you, for instance, are just starting to play a piece and don't feel very confident with your rhythm, then it's better to have a lower sensitivity, because then the app doesn't start following all the maybe like the silly things that you might be doing with your timing. And also, like if you play in a very noisy environment, the app might have some trouble hearing all of your attacks. So in that case, it might be better to play with the lower sensitivity. Yeah, basically that's it, I think, about the settings. There are still some advanced settings, like you can transpose the music. It doesn't transpose the sheet music, just the played piano part. And there's a way to make the app synchronize either earlier or later to your playing, because sometimes some people expect to hear like the piano a little bit ahead of the beat and sometimes a little bit behind the beat. And also, it's like on some setups, you get some added delay to the sound that sometimes the app doesn't know how to compensate for. So if you feel like the app is always kind of pushing the tempo, you might want to adjust the synchronization. And then finally, you can control how early or late the page turns would be. That option may not be available yet on Android.
Yeah, I don't see it yet on the Android, but wow, this is really brilliant. So we only have a couple of minutes left. Are there any great tips that you have for us? Or, I'm hoping we just all jump in and start trying this.
Well,
I find it really fun as a practice helper. Keeps me practicing more, it keeps me interested in the actual practice process a whole lot more than without hearing the harmonies.
Well, if you want to get most out of the app, it's really good to understand like that you are kind of dealing with a pianist that's blindfolded and has only one ear. And that's actually a huge challenge for anybody. Like if you have tried to actually accompany somebody without relying on any visual cues and with only like an earplug in your other ear, it's super difficult. So the easier you can make the job for the app, the better the accompaniment will be. Which means that, like if you're using Bluetooth, that adds quite a lot of delay to the sound. And in worst case, the app has to play a note like half a second in advance to be together with you. And also, if you're using internal speakers to hear the sound, the microphone might be just next to the speaker, so it has to really try hard to erase the piano sound.
And I hate to end this meeting abruptly, but Zoom is about to end it for us. So I'll continue our conversation with you. You have been fantastic. And if anybody has any questions, send them to me because I don't want to overwhelm Juho. And in the meantime, I'd like to say thank you so much, Juho, for your time today, for this app, and for giving us a little explanation of it. And our next piece that we'll be doing in Soul of the Month is also on this MyPianist Pro app. So I hope everybody in this group will consider the app as a great tool for practicing and recording your Goddard suite coming up here